justice and peace, and equality.
Game Changers Magazine, Game Changers Media Network, Voices of the Village podcast, where change starts with conversation. We're back with Dr. D. Terrence Foster of the D. Terrence Foster Foundation. How you doing today, Mr. Dr. Foster?
Well, I'm doing well, Andrea. Good to be here. It's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to chatting with you, and at least we learned something about at least people learn something about myself and others.
Definitely, man. You know, I know you spend a lot of your time being happy, Dr. Foster, because we want to talk about this phenomenal book that you have called The Stress Book. April being National Stress Awareness Month, award-winning book. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're talking about 40 ways to manage stress and enjoy your life. Tell us what inspired you to write the book, Dr.
Okay, so in about 2020, Andrea, when the pandemic was, sort of taking off, and there was a major stress going on in not just America, but throughout the country and the world.
Right.
I was in the process of doing a lot of YouTube videos about the virus and how best to deal with it. And I did one about stress.
Okay.
And the one about stress was a little more interesting and a little more reaching.
Okay.
Or resonate more with people than the others that I did.
Okay.
And I said to myself, it would be a good thing to do a book about stress.
Definitely.
In addition to the video. And that's where you see the genesis of the book became evident to me. And then I said, okay, let's do this. I started off wanting to do a book that maybe about 20 plus ways to manage stress.
Right.
And it ended up being 40 plus ways to manage stress. So that was the revelation, because one thing about writing is you start writing, you get into that zone where information becomes more evident or more relevant, and you sort of bring that all into play, and it becomes something that you realize people could benefit from it, and then you just put it out there.
Definitely.
And it's been a wonderful thing.
Well, we're definitely dealing in stressful times during this time, because climate of everything, new regimes, different things happening, the world is changing, and a lot of people, some people are stressed. Like, I mean, even on the road, I look at stress as like, we're traveling and people are like, oh, get out of the way, blah, blah. I know that's road rage, but to me, that's some form of stress. What is stress, and how does it impact a person's life?
Well, first thing, let me just back up a little bit. Even though this book was written around the time of the coronavirus, it's not a book about the coronavirus itself. It's a book which we could call a green book, meaning that 10, 15, 20 years from now, anyone could pick this book up and still read it and benefit from it and from the information that is in it. Now, so what is stress? Stress is one of those conditions, or it's an emotional, mental, or physical condition that generate certain response in the body. And those responses would be physical or emotional response. And the body have a way of responding to that, where you could feel tense, you could feel some sort of strain, you could have palpitation, you could feel like we're overwhelmed by whatever condition that causes stress. So stress can be caused by maybe as you mentioned, you're driving and somebody cuts you off.
Yeah.
And you look and you say, well, why is this happening? And so that's a stressor or a factor that could cause stress. Or it could be you come home and your door is broken and somebody breaks into your home. And you say, well, okay, should I go in or what should I do?
Yeah.
And that starts generating some sort of level of anxiety in you. So now you start feeling stressed and you're feeling, well, how am I going to deal with this? What does this mean? And all different types of emotions and feelings start going through you. And the question is, how do you deal with some of those things?
Absolutely.
And that's in part what the stress is and how one respond to it and the best way to deal with these things.
So naturally, everybody stresses or has some form of stress and deals with stress.
Yes, stress is not limited by just to one set of people. Stress is universal. Everyone experiences stress. Now, stress can be in the form of acute stress or chronic stress.
Okay.
Or we could even break stress down. Another way of looking at stress is you could be in what is called a state of calm or calmness.
Okay.
You could be in what is called eustress, or you could be in distress. Now, what are those terms mean? Now, if you are in distress, it means that you have a level of stress that is so overwhelming that it limits the ability of you to do the things that you want to do in life effectively.
Okay.
Whereas calmness, you're just there, you're calm, you're enjoying life.
Okay.
It's a good. It seems like it's a good thing. And then there's eustress, which is, you could say, the mid range of those two extremes.
Okay.
Distress and calmness, and in between you have what is called eustress. So eustress is really the ideal form of stress. And what that means is that we should all strive to experience some level of stress, or whether we do or not, we will experience some level of stress.
Okay.
Now, here's the thing: when you are experiencing what is called eustress, it means that you are in a state where that level of stress could motivate you.
Okay.
It could make you do things that if you have no stress, you probably won't do or will not do effectively. For example, let's say you are going to do an examination. That's a stressful situation.
Definitely.
So you're prepared for it. But then think about the consequence or the result of that examination.
Okay.
It could be one where it leads to you getting into the college of your choice, you getting a promotion.
Right.
All those things are good stress.
Okay.
On the other hand, what if you find yourself where you're just there and you're calm, you have nothing to worry about, nothing to motivate you, you're just relaxed, you're on the beach. There are times when that are going to be a good thing for you.
Okay.
Right? So you're there and you said, okay, well, what do I do? Nothing.
Yeah.
I don't have anything to do. I don't have any goals. I have no dream.
Okay.
Then that level of quote unquote calmness or relaxation is not good. As opposed to the calmness where you've been working on all day, you've been up and down, you've been grinding it out, and now you're just chilling.
Right.
You're just there and you're just enjoying that. Then that level of calmness is good. But you don't want to get in a state of life where you don't have motivation, you don't have any stress.
Okay.
In fact, I've heard it said that if you're doing something in life, you should have some level of anxiety, some level of stress in you.
Okay.
Because it means that you're probably doing something out of your comfort zone.
Wow.
And therefore, because you're moving out of your comfort zone, now you're getting into a state where, man, will this work?
Yes.
Well, I'm going to mortgage my house to do this business. Should I do it?
Yeah.
And it makes you nervous.
Right.
And they're extreme to this, and there's a limit to which people could go. But in any event, when you get out of your comfort zone, but it's control, it's thought through. You've done your homework, and now you're in a state where you said, okay, now I'm going to do this. I'm going to get the loan, I'm going to open this business, and I'm going to roll with it, and I'm going to bring my best people along with me.
Right.
So that's a good thing. So you're in the eustress mode. At the other end, as I said, is distress when you say, you know what, my life sucks. I can't do this. I'm in bills up to my head.
Right.
And nothing is working for me. So what do I do? And that's when, sometimes professional help is needed. Sometimes you got to reevaluate where you are.
Right.
And what the stress book is about, in part, is that it provides people a roadmap. Where they could look at things and look at things in a way that they could say, you know what do I do next? What's the next step in trying to get to a point where stress is not taking over my life, where I have some control? Because we all going to live through stress.
Absolutely.
It matters how well we are able to control it and control the factors that leads to stress.
Now, Doc, as I'm reading through the book and I'm looking at some of the things that are going on, and so we're not looking at stress as a bad thing. We're looking at stress more as a balanced thing and how to actually manage it, right? So most of the time we think of stress as like, man, I'm stressed out. I gotta pay my mortgage, or I'm stressed out. We look at stress as a negative connotation or a toxic thing. But sometimes stress is good when, like you say, we're trying to achieve a goal, we're trying to work towards something.
Right.
You know, you're out of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us the benefits and the difference between that stress, that level of stress versus, hey man, putting that stress on your body, getting your heart rate up. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, how does that affect the body?
All right. So stress. There are two. Well, you're looking at basically what is called acute stress and chronic stress. There's some stress that is going to just eat you right there. Let's say you're going in, you're trying to pay your mortgage.
Okay.
And right there you're saying, okay, well, I'm up about in the next 5 days, I'm going to be in, my mortgage payment is going to be passed through.
Okay.
Now, and you said, well, how am I going to resolve this? No, that could be resolved in maybe in 3 or 5 days. Maybe you have a good uncle or a friend that could lend you the money. So that stress for that moment is resolved.
Okay.
But what if you are in a situation, let's say you're in a relationship.
Okay.
And the relationship is not going very well. You could be married or however it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not going, so you have now what is called an ongoing stress. So you come home, you're unhappy, you're there, you look at your significant other, your spouse, and you say, oh my God, I got to get out of this. or they're looking at you and then saying, well, what am I doing with this guy or this person?
Definitely, yeah.
And then you're living in this for a long period of time. So the question is, that's when that stress sort of takes a hold on you in a much more, long-term phase where you're looking at, okay, you're developing palpitation, now you can't sleep well.
Okay.
Now you're losing weight or you're gaining weight.
Wow.
Or you're having a myriad of things could be going on.
Okay.
You have sleep disorder, sexual disorder, all kind of disorder are possible with stress. Now, what the book does in part is that it lists all the different ways. So, for example, this book has over 40 plus ways to manage stress. And some of the things, Andrel, that are in this book in terms of how to deal with stress is it's broken down into 3 main categories. What is called physical stress or mental action, physical action, and community action.
Yeah,
but then within those actions, there are 22 chapters. And although I'm not going to bore anyone with the different 22 chapters, I'll just list some of the things that the book covers. What is stress? And it sort of walks you through that. The anatomy of stress, concept and stress management. Okay, identify your stressors. That's one of the most, because a lot of times people are stressed, but they don't know why, or they have an idea, but they really haven't taken the time to clearly define why they're stressed. Okay. And therefore, if they're not sure why they're stressed, then they can't really address it effectively.
Absolutely.
So one of the key factors is, okay, I'm stressed, so why is this? Am I stressed because I didn't pay my rent? Am I stressed because somebody that I'm working with is creating a problem? Okay. Or am I stressed because all of these things? And if it's all of these things, which of these things are important? Okay. And identifying your stressor is, or the thing that are causing you the stress is one of the important things. Some people are stressed because of money.
Yes, definitely.
And money is always a big thing because some people live within their means, some people live way outside.
Way outside, yeah.
And that we have a chapter here, budget your money.
Right.
Then we talk about the mind and body affecting. We talk about exercise. Okay. Your mind and your body. That's the section we talk about. Accept yourself. Okay. Accepting yourself and who you are to reduce stress. Because like in a case like that, there are people sometimes who don't really get to the point where they accept who they are as a person, and physically, mentally, and emotionally. So we got to learn to know who we are and accept ourselves. There's a chapter there. Learn to express yourself. Okay. Sometimes we suffer in silence. Stuff happened to us, but we could be at work, could be at our home, but we don't talk about it. Right. We're in silence, and those way in you. And as I said, I'm not going to go through, but there's one that is also common is sex. We have a chapter in here about sex. Wow. I don't want to talk about sex. We have a chapter in here about how to say no, or the chapter simply said, it's okay to say no. Right, okay. Right. Okay. Because sometimes we take on too much, much more than we can manage. Yes. And if we just take the time and say, you know what, I believe in what you're doing, I think it's good, but right now I can't help you. Okay. I would like to, but I can't. Right. And saying no is sometimes the best thing you could do to reduce your stress. And then one of the things that the book ended with in chapter 22 is getting professional help, because sometimes we forget that some of these things are bigger than we are.
Definitely.
And if it's bigger than us, then it means that professional help is often the best way to resolve this. We could talk to a pastor, we could talk to our friends,
Okay.
and sometimes our pastor could be instrumental in helping us to reduce stress, but not always.
Okay.
And if we find professional people, it could be a therapist, could be your doctor, from your primary care doctor to a psychologist or a psychiatrist. All those could be effective partner in helping to reduce stress.
Okay.
But you have to take the step to do that, because if not, then you become more overwhelmed and more restrained and restricted by stress.
Now, you spoke about one level of stress where a person not accepting who they are,
Right.
kind of like trying to live above their means,
Right.
and not really accepting the reality of like where they're at. Like, what does that build from? Does that build from like, because I know as children we have dreams to be professional basketball players, professional football players, or big time actors or whatever.
Right.
So, do you think that stress develops when a person says, "Hey, I expected my life to be one way," and then they kind of get older, and then it's like, okay, it's not so peaches and roses. I really got to work for it. So, tell us about that level of stress and how it impacts
So
plays.
one of the things we all, as you said, we all grow up having dreams and aspiration, and sometimes we never get to it. And some people just grow up just floating around, no dreams, no goals. And we get to that point in life where we see certain things and we want certain things.
Okay.
Or we believe we're entitled to certain things. Or we see other people with a level of success and we said, I want what they have. Or we try to keep up with what other people are doing.
Yes.
So what that often leads to, in part, is that some people said, you know what, man, that's a nice car. I'm going to get that car.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else that matters to them other than getting that car.
Wow.
So therefore, their budget, it may be outside of their budget.
Correct.
It may be outside of their price range.
Yes.
But they do everything to get it. And guess what? They're not considering all the other factors. You'll have people who will live in their parents' home, but yet still they want to drive a $50,000 or $100,000 car.
Absolutely.
Or they want to buy a suit for $1,000. And you said, well, okay, you can do that, but what happened after that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's when reality checks in. So they are way outside their budget. They have no plans, no dreams. So you have to be realistic.
Yes.
You have to have a budget, and you got to live within that budget.
Definitely.
And people who fail to do that find themselves either they're really stressed because they get to that point, well, okay, I've got this car. I was hoping that internet deal or that podcast was going to make me millions, or I didn't know I got to give up this car that I have, or I got to give up this house that I've been renting in, or all these crazy stuff. People go through that. So the idea is that people have to really plan their life, live within their budget.
Okay.
And, if you live within your budget, that's going to be a major factor in reducing your stress.
Okay.
Like when it comes to financial challenges.
Wow.
And people some people haven't learned how to do that.
Man,
and even people who are making relatively, quote unquote, a lot of money, they run into that. I'm sure you've heard the terms, or the state where there are many professional players, basketball, sports players, or people just earning good money, what we call good money, 6 figures, whatever.
Yes.
And yet still, they live outside of that means.
Correct.
And regardless of your budget, you have to, regardless of how much you earn, you have to live within a budget.
You definitely have to live within a budget. Don, we're gonna go to a commercial break because we gotta recognize some of our sponsors. And man, shout out to Newell, Miss Rhonda Crockett, Granddaughter's Love, serving the community, doing great things in the community. Also, shout out to Community and College Partnership Programs. You guys, make sure you say the date for D. Terrence Foster Golf Fundraising Foundation at Crystal Lake Golf and Resort. August 22nd, August 23rd? 22nd, I'm sorry. August 22nd, fundraiser, helping the youth through health and education initiative, health awareness and education initiative. We got to go to a commercial break. Game Changers Magazine, Game Changers Media Network, Voices of the Village podcast, where change starts with conversation. You guys need to
justice and peace and equality.